go now to the monthly work plan. Thank you, Sally. Page 63, we'll just straight into questions. In the light, hopefully. Yeah, good thinking. So, questions. Councillor Bell.
I have a handful, if I may. On page 63, the very first item, the Local Government Leaders Forum, is that the meeting next week that you're preparing for that? Will there be an agenda for it or anything to prepare for, or do we just show up with an empty wine glass or what?
Just not so much empty wine glass. There is no step-by-step agenda. I need to confirm a couple of things, but there will be some content of what we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
On page 64, I'm just raising under land management. There have been a recent exchange. It's happy to have Mike here. An exchange of emails around this regional research institute, and it does appear to be now heading off in competing directions. One which I think we're trying to lead, and one which seems to be coming out of the Chamber of Commerce, who all of a sudden has a interest in soil, which I hadn't really understood to be an expertise of the Chamber of Commerce. So I'm a little nervous that this thing that now MPI, whoever's behind it, has put out some further guidance. They are moving now towards some deadlines for proposals from the regions, and I'd sure like to be reassured that we are still on track. We had engaged a consultant to help drive this process, Dan Bloomer, and I don't know where that all stands at this point, or whether he's on the case, or whether this has somehow fallen through the cracks, or where it is.
Can I just first make a comment, Councillor, that MPI have indicated that they do not wish regional councils to be the lead agencies in any of these proposals, but that obviously doesn't preclude us from providing some support. So to that extent, that's really where we've been trying to provide, or been willing, I should say, to provide support we're asked for. But I'll ask Mike if he wants to add anything else.
Yes, up until this, other than the first input that we've provided, and we've had no real contact with anybody until the recent flurry of emails. It seems very unfortunate to me that it seems to be a very fragmented approach to Hawke's Bay, and unless there is some real leadership from somebody, and it can't be this council as the CE has advised, I think we're sort of we're not heading down a very good track, basically. Yeah.
So are we no longer paying Dan? I mean, he was making some substantial progress at pulling together the private sector parties that would need to be in the lead on this, but it does take that. It takes a shepherd, and he was the shepherd. So we left him high and dry, or what?
He has done a lot of work on it, and unfortunately it just does not seem to me, or my understanding, and I haven't really had a lot of close involvement in it, is that we are industry or commerce or whoever it is in Hawke's Bay is not really getting in behind Dan and pulling in the same direction. So other than that, I don't really have a feel for why it's got to become fragmented or what the issues are. I really haven't been involved.
I think we could probably sum it up, Councillor, by saying that we're still willing to financially support Dan, or in the development of a proposition. But as I said, the key expectation is that this be driven by private industry, and he's been unable to really get that behind him. So our hands are somewhat, as are his, reasonably tied.
Okay. Next question, item 44 on page 66. refers to the Hastings District Plan and a number of appeals we've joined in on. Are any of those related to Ocean Beach?
I can't answer that, I'm sorry. I could find out for you though. So I'm sorry, Gavin would be the person I have to speak to on that.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Item 41, sorry, 38. What does it mean by delegation sought to negotiate settlement?
That was the discussion we had this morning,
The decision this morning.
just around the Panpac appeal and the delegation coming back to myself to work with the various parties and hopefully settle or mediate an outcome that upholds the substantive decision of the hearings panel.
Okay. Further, Councillor Hewitt, then Councillor Dick.
I have 3 questions. The first one is a comment, and that's with regard to number 13 and the HBRC staff bringing the environmental management providers up to speed. I was at a meeting the other evening where HBRC was presenting to local landowners, HBRC was presenting to local landowners around Plan Change 6. And I just have a comment that there was a farm environmental management practitioner provider there who tagged on very closely to our guys, and when she put up her hand and said, oh look, the price of this farm plan is about 5k, the feeling in the room was that that was a 5,000 that was payable to HBRC. So I just think that the difference in these providers providing the service needs to be really clear when our representatives are out in the community, because that line, that boundary line just wasn't there, and I don't think it reflected all that well on us, because there was quite a degree of resistance with this particular group, and there were 30 odd people in the meeting. Yeah. My next, just with regard to 21, just for your information, there is another Apatuki scheme meeting this afternoon at 4 o'clock. I may be a little late, but I'm going. So if anyone else is interested. And 51, the earthquake exercise, how did it go? Because I know it was quite a big project.
We haven't had a formal debrief yet, but we've had a few, what I might call a hot debrief, which was, just really everyone's impressions of it straight after it concluded. And I think, probably speak from all of us, there was a couple of really good things from it. First of all, there's always processes we can improve on and learn from during the running of an exercise in relation to an emergency. But I think Ian McDonald summed it up well. He said, despite the fact that we've got lots of things to learn, commitment and attitude are not two of them. Everyone got very involved and participated really well and sincerely and in a good way. The other thing I would note, I did one day out at the group office, day 1 of the exercise out at the group office in Hastings, day 2 I did in here. It's the first time we've run an exercise since the 2 groups, if you like, have been split. So we had the Regional Council Incident Control Team based here. The group out in Hastings makes a hugely good difference to how we operate and how we understand what our roles are, I think. So that decision to set up the group separately from this building was a very wise one.
Just in slightly different. Would you like to comment on the award that you got for civil defence last Friday?
I can't comment too much other than I probably should actually have had Ian there and he can. Yeah, it's a shame he's not here, though he is based out in Hastings. Oh, but Helen Shea's sitting down the back of the room, so she may be able to talk about it, please. Yep.
Yeah, it was the National Māori Language Awards, and we won an award for our Rural Muckles Walk, which is a resource that's been developed for early childhood. There was seen a real gap in early childhood emergency planning, both with the children as well as the whānau outside. And so they developed a resource, which is a little book that talks about Ngāti Kahungunu legend, and there's a earthquake and then they're taken on a wee trip up a hill, and we've got copies of it up in comms if you want to come and have a look at it. It was a great resource, and actually a lot of different iwi around the country are looking at it as developing it for their areas as well, because it's actually Kahungunu dialect, so it would be changed for each of the different iwi. So really positive, funded in part by the Resilience Fund. So yeah, a really good project, and really exciting that it's been recognised nationally.
Having the copies and copy as long as they acknowledge its root source. I don't have those others pitching our stuff and claiming us as theirs. The songs and all sorts of things.
Yeah, it was a real joint project, which was great. So.
Mr Chairman, I'd just like to comment on item 50, investigations are underway, potential redirection of NZTA funding into addressing drivers licensing issues in Hawke's Bay. Coincidentally, it's been topical in the newspaper, but the Transport Committee has been concerned about driver licensing issues for some period of time, and Councillor Barker has taken a lead on that. Basically, there's the opportunity, if we can find $30,000 in cross-the-region funding, either from TAs, ourselves, or other groups, then we can attract $90,000 of NZTA funding for a period of 3 years, $120,000, and the concept would be that if we can do that, it would be administered by Anne Redgrave, our transport manager, who in effect would write specifications for community organisations to provide driver licensing services, in particular in those remote areas like Wairau and Central Hawke's Bay, where they have to come down here or to Hastings to do a test, and also in areas of deprivation where it's actually difficult financially and otherwise for youngsters to go through the stepping stones. There's some early indication of some funding sources, and there's an intention to have another quick meeting tomorrow with Anne to progress that. While we're on the transport thing, I would really like to take the liberty of just mentioning a little bit about rail, because I've become increasingly conscious that Council hasn't heard anything, other than to know that the Regional Council made a highly conditional alternative proposition to KiwiRail. KiwiRail responded belatedly a few weeks ago, then swore us all into total confidence, which is why nothing's been said to date. But in the meantime, the General Manager of the Port has made statements publicly indicating their support for some initiative if it happens, and KiwiRail themselves in a couple of media statements have made comment as well. So there's the possibility of something, but it's taking time and some difficulty to materialise to a point to actually take it to the council, but we're hopeful there might be some progress in the near future. And incidentally, while I'm at it, I spoke to the new lumber processing manager for Panpac yesterday at the port opening, and I asked him what proportion of the 2 million extra tonnes a year of logs out of the Wairau district are you going to actually be able to capture and process? And he said virtually none. So that means that 2 million's either got to be carried totally on road, or with some luck, at least half of which are carried by rail. Even then, there's going to be, within 2 or 3 years' time, there's going to be another 1 million tonnes, probably up to that, having to go on that precarious State Highway 2 from Wairau down to the port.
Thank you. Okay, are you happy to move? No other questions? Happy to move. Seconder, thank you. Councillor Barker. Councillor Bevan, you wish to speak? speakers? Put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Adey and others. Now I see we have minor items and then we have the much anticipated Chairman's report. So we'll go to minor items. Ahuriri Estuary, Councillor Belford.
Yeah, I noticed in the consent applications report that we get through Ian's shop that there's a consent here from the airport regarding pump drainage water into the estuary, which I assume is a continuation of current practice, basically. But in addition to that, there's the pending issue, is there not, of the Napier City Council consent application to put its stormwater into the estuary. So could we get a update at some point on what all this adds up to and what its impact is currently on the estuary?
Absolutely. And that's it. I see a nod down the end. Wairoa, do you wish to kick off? Others may like to join in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It really, I suppose the matter needs to be raised just so that it's recorded that we went there and what we did. So I just wanted to concentrate on the two major things. We opened the refurbished office, which we all know about, and had quite an interesting presentation on some new walkways up in the Mahi area. But the two key things really that we traversed during the course of the day were the issues around the closing and the reopening of the mouth of the Wairoa River, which is causing a fair bit of grief, and there were some pretty aggro councillors from Wairoa on that issue and the other one involving forestry harvest. So there were three issues really. Was the data accurate? And almost every one of them said they didn't think it was. That might put in front of the meeting. Secondly, are we employing best practice in terms of responses to when the mouth of the river is closing? And the third one was around water quality when the mouth is closed, with the discharges that then get caught in behind, and whether that has an impact on people swimming and so forth. So I think there's probably some follow-ups that we need to do there. Maybe it's environmental services, I guess, I'm not quite sure. The other one was the forestry harvest, which of course is going to multiply by 10 times in the pretty near future up in the Wairoa area. And the real concern was what happens to the slash when the logs are removed. Well, I suppose there's two concerns. One is the slash, and in a recent rain event, a lot of it's ended up on a whole bunch of beaches, and I think we've agreed with Wairoa that we're going to co-fund the clearing of it and try and put some pressure on the forestry operators to fund it, to pay for it. I'm not quite sure what.
Could I just clarify that? Yes, no, there's been no formal agreement at all. There's been an initial discussion, but that was slightly misleading what was said yesterday.
Perhaps a suggestion,
yes,
is the right way to put it. And there were some concerns expressed about the fact that there is still slash sitting in the rivers up in the hills, which is just waiting for another rainfall event to end up down the bottom again. So there are some real problems there, and one of the interesting things for me was that Gisborne issues resource consents for forestry felling, and they have just as many problems, it appears, as we have, and we don't issue resource consents. So it causes one to wonder about the benefit of having a resource consent if it doesn't actually address some of the problems, not of just the slash, but also erosion with the creation of roads and platforms where they do their milling operations from and so forth. So there are some pretty significant issues there that we're going to have to get our heads around in the pretty near future, and I'm sure other councillors will add to that.
Thank you. I think you've given us a pretty good précis of the day. Thank you, Councillor Bevan, including the Mayor and his chains opening very impressive. Port of Napier.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Honourable Stephen Joyce opened the new office building and the mobile crane simulator yesterday. A good turnout, 100-odd people. The building is in no way elegant or an Art Deco example, but it's functional. It looks like about 6 containers bolted together, and maybe it actually is. But the simulator I think they made a very good decision to buy that for $1 million or so, because it means that they can pre-train, pre-select staff without having to send them to Stuttgart for 3 weeks. And there's other ports that are lining up to use the thing as well. Stephen Joyce was a lot more upbeat this time about regional ports and Napier in particular than he was when he came here in 2010, I think it was, to open the port extension. And at that stage, you know, there were rumblings about major port hubs and that sort of thing, but he now recognises the benefit of competition between regional ports and is most impressed and in fact did not know that Napier's the 4th largest export container port in New Zealand. Just a little thing relating to rail again, the demolition of the old Art Deco office building has meant that the rail infrastructure is able to be extended so that there are longer rakes of wagons could go in there and out. So good progress there, I think.
Thank you. Right, now for some reason the Chairman's monthly report was after the minor items in the Secretary, but so let's move to that now. There's been some consideration, and I've taken on board feedback from various councillors about the relevance of a diary dump each month and the opportunity to actually perhaps produce a document that we can have more discussion around. And the reason I went with this discussion this month was to put some of our thoughts as discussed previously out in the public arena before the meeting next week. So I guess all I'd say about this time is, am I on the right track? Is this the sort of thing that's going to be a vehicle for us to discuss current issues for the council? I mean, it could be as simple as a range of bullet points for us to discuss at any one time, rather than on Friday I went and met with so-and-so. So I really would appreciate some feedback.
This takes longer to read. One of the things, if I may, one of the things I would look forward to in a report like this, if you had a meeting with, for example, the Mayor of Napier, met with the Mayor of Napier, raised 1, 2, 3. Mayor of Napier raised 4, 5, 6. Agreed to look at such and such with me, so we get the issues. You meet someone else, other group or delegation, just as what are the key issues that are raised, and I think that the meeting decided that would progress from there, so we get a feel for it. And as far as I'm concerned, if the chair wants to write a commentary on what the chair sees as the issues confronting the council, that's exactly within your province to do that. That's a forum for us. The chair's report. It's your report. No one else's.
So the items raised here are really just to put out there that we have been discussing this stuff, and I'll be taking this paper to the mayoral forum on Monday. So, Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you. I thought this was an interesting change, and I appreciated the time you put into it. I think that it would be helpful if you also flagged any key meetings that you've got coming up in the upcoming months, so then we can have input into them should we choose to.
Yes, I too appreciated the time your PA put into it. 9.5, what do you mean by 3 waters?
I was going to say something inappropriate, but so there's potable water, drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater, which we've just been discussing. Stormwater, which we've just been discussing, i.e. Ahuderi, drinking water, town water supplies, for example, and wastewater, what happens to the outgoing. No, it's over here.
So the 3 waters is a name that actually the local government New Zealand collectively gives to that project.
Mr. Chairman, I like the diary style, but with amplification, I think.
Okay.
It's also nice to know what you've been doing. But something a bit in between.
Okay, well, that was a starter for 10. Any other thoughts there? What do you want, Councillor Belford? 10 pages.
To me, the diary was useful, but Debbie's point, the upcoming, other things that you have on the calendar in the next month that you might find useful to get some guidance on.
Yeah, okay, guidance keeps coming through.
And a small poem as a contribution to our artistic life.
Limerick? Would Limerick
Haiku
do?
or something.
Was a young lady, yeah.
Right?
Sonnet.
A sonnet. Any other thoughts? Testing the boundaries anyway. Let's see what we can do next month.
No, I think I like the diary actually as well as this, but this is not going to be the fuller one. But
Hey.
Would you want us to grade it next month?
Someone happy to move then, that we move on. Thank you, Councillor Barker. We have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Bevan. Further discussion. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Now we have a set of minutes and a small item in public.
before we go to public excluded, could I just, I know it's not on the agenda and not minor item, but could we do something about the sound system in this meeting room? It is inadequate. The other thing is we shouldn't have important, because we will have phone call-ins from time to time, and that was diabolical today. We should have a sound system where the phone is hooked into and comes out the speakers on everybody's desk and we can all hear. I found that for such a significant piece of advice, and for someone who we're probably paying a significant sum of money to have it squawk, 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 inaudible, down the line, unacceptable, out of a multi-million dollar budget. Just don't get it.
It's it's an ongoing discussion with
Can I just...
Leanne, but it's expensive to fix. That's been the issue.
Yeah, I'm making progress. We have been in discussions around a number of facets around this particular room, around this venue, bearing in mind the feedback that you've given previously, Councillor, in relation to sound, in relation to air conditioning, in relation to presentations, etc. And so we are in the process of getting some options drawn up, and would like to bring those to you early in the new year, because they will inevitably have some annual plan implications. They got a small room.
They had really good screens up, everybody could see. Don't worry about clearing people in front of the screen. I mean, oh boy, they've got something sharp.
Very new, very new. The mayor was just showing off. He knew we were coming. But so two things. Is someone getting in touch with Andy to come back to talk to his paper? Is Andy there? Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go to the resolutions to move into public excluded to deal with the minutes and the appointment of Napier Port directors. Is someone happy to move in that direction, including obviously Dr. Pearce be allowed to be part of that process? So someone happy to move, you happy to second? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, carried. Let's move into public exclusion.